is this taking picture too?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a video.
So I can do some motions.
Yep.
And this is one of those things I kind of wished I some way had a way of just pouring it all out all at once, you know, but it's one of those things you have to verbalize and tell each little individual story the best you can. It's kind of hard to condense it down and everything. Okay, I was telling this story about how the Cheneys and the Johnsons were getting together on my birthday, and I was wanting to get engaged to Alice. And so after the big family dinner, it dawned on me that what I should do is take her up in an airplane that I'd learned to fly. Rich College had an airplane, and I could take ground school from Rich College and then rent the airplane and learn how to fly. So I'd already gotten my private pilot's license, and so I decided to take Alice for a ride, and she didn't know where I was going to take her, or what. She didn't realize that I was going to give her a ring, and so we got in the car and went over to St. Anthony. It dawned on me that that'd be a good thing to do, take her up in an airplane. I don't believe she had ever been in an airplane before, no. And so she was pretty excited about going up in an airplane, especially a little one like that, and flying around. And we got in the airplane and took off from the airport. We were flying around, and we flew out over my dad's and mom's house where we'd had this big dinner together, the two families. And we kind of flew low over the house and circled over the house a little, and we'd taken an ice cream carton in case she should get sick or something. She'd have something to help her. So we flew out over the where we'd had the family dinner out in my mom and dad's house, and she decided she was going to be okay. We didn't need that thing anymore, so we threw out this ice cream carton down where they could pick it up. I had this ring in the box in my pocket, so as soon as we got up in the air, before we even went out to the fly over the farmhouse, I pulled out this box with the ring in it. He just left the box closed and handed her the box and said, "Open this up and see what you think." And so I said, "No, this is kind of a story that's come along with this tall tale, but it was a unique situation." So I said, "No, here's this box. You can either take this ring and put it on and say you'll wait for me, or else you can get out and walk." So that's been kind of a family story and joke over the years. So I was engaged to Alice while I was gone on my mission. So anyway, I came home from my mission, and Alice and I got married. I think it was only like 2 weeks after I got home that we got married in Idaho Falls Temple. And that was really a fun time for me. And we went on our honeymoon. We didn't have any money, and I didn't have a job, and I was helping my dad do some farm work and things and making a little bit of money. And so anyway, we went on our honeymoon with $50 to make the honeymoon trip, and I was using a family car. I should back up and tell a story about when my mom and dad and Alice decided to come pick me up. off my mission. Dad was okay with driving, but he wanted Alice to drive this big old Fraser car. It was really a nice car, clear back to Toronto to pick me up off my mission. So Alice drove this car all the way across the United States into Canada. They even had to get on a ferry boat and go across one of the lakes, one of the Great Lakes. So there we were in the mission home. It was a little awkward because here's my girlfriend coming to pick me up, and Mom and Dad were there, and the mission president, and, a little awkward and wondering what about it all. And the mission president was trying to make me at ease, and so he gave us a little talk there, and he says, "Well, Elder Johnson, as of now, you're released from your mission. Go ahead and kiss her." Yeah, so I did it in front of everybody. And so that kind of relieved the tension anyway. And worked out just fine. And so anyway, I came home and we got married. And my dad let me take the big car, the big Fraser. We got part way. We decided to do our honeymoon up to Canada, Western Canada, Calgary and Edmonton and Lake Louise and that. We went up there and we had people that we could stay with without costing us anything, so that was good. We only had to rent a motel a couple of times. But we had a flat tire on the way up. We were in Montana and had a flat tire. So we put the spare on, and we were traveling kind of without a spare. And I was really quite nervous about it. But it all turned out okay, and we had a wonderful honeymoon at Lake Louise and the other sites in Western Canada. We got home with 50 cents in our pocket, I think. So it was pretty touch and go on money. But one thing, I got very, very tired coming home, and so I had Alice drive. She was used to that car because she'd driven it clear across the United States. And so I had her drive, and I got in the back seat to have a little nap. And of course, in those days, we didn't even have seat belts or anything. And so, but I woke up and I looked up there, and she was going 85 miles an hour across Montana. And I says, "Whoa, boy, you're overdoing it a little." But anyway, she was a good driver all her life. She was a good driver. We lived in Sugar City for a little while, and I helped Dad on the farm. Then we moved to Pocatello, and Alice had a good job, which helped a lot. And we were able to buy a trailer house, and I was able to get a job in a cheese plant and so on. And then we moved from Pocatello down to Clearfield, Utah, and I worked at Hill Air Force Base. And then we moved to Los Angeles, and I worked in the aircraft plant. And Alice worked as a bookkeeper, and then we tried to save enough money to start buying a farm, and I still wanted to be a farmer. And so we had a chance to buy this farm up in Washington. And my brother Vaughn had already gotten moved out to the Columbia Basin in Washington, and so learned about this farm that was near where Vaughn had his farm. And so as it turns out, this lady that owned this one farm lived in Los Angeles, not too far from where we lived down there when I was working in the aircraft plant. And so I went over and talked to her and bought this farm without even seeing it. I had enough money saved up and was able to buy this farm. I think it was about $9,000 if I remember right.
Yeah.
No, it wasn't even 100 acres. It was 90-something acres. And so turns out that it wasn't big enough to make a living on, so we only lived there on it for a short time. And then we had a chance to go to an auction. These farms were owned by the school, and they decided to sell these to get money for schools. This is out in Washington in the Columbia Basin, near Pasco, Washington. So we went down to the courthouse to buy a farm on an auction. It turns out that my neighbor wanted my farm to go with his. And so I was able to sell that farm and get prepared to go to this auction. And so it was a really quite an exciting time, you know, to think that we could buy a farm. I wasn't a veteran like the others that were getting those farms on the drawing. And so the rules were that you could only own 160 acres. And so we wanted to get two units, they called them. I wanted to get two of them if I could. And so in order to do that, I could buy one and my dad could buy one in his name. My dad and mom came out to visit, and my dad and I walked over all these 13 farms trying to decide which ones would be good to bid on. The ones that we were wanting the worst, or the most, were still in sagebrush. They had big, tall sagebrush, taller than I was, you know, 6 feet tall or so, of sagebrush. And so anyway, turns out that these two that we wanted the most were hooked together, had two units right together. So when the bidding started, boy, we were really, your heart's pounding and pumping, and you wonder if you're even going to be able to get any of it, because there's a lot of people in there wanting to bid on them.
Mm-hmm.
But you had to pay cash for them. And so we'd saved up and sold this first farm, and we had some money saved up, but not a lot. And as it turns out, we were able to win the bid on these two farm units. And so that was really a blessing to be able to buy these. Some of my choice memories go back to these farms that we were able to take out of sagebrush and get water on it from the Grand Coulee Dam on the Columbia River to irrigate with on this beautiful dirt. It was, Columbia Basin is a wonderful farming country because the season's so long, and you could raise wonderful crops out there. And boy, my life was really blessed. And I've had some lessons of life out there in Washington. Not too long after we got there to that sagebrush farm, one of the sad things and hard things was little Mark, our second oldest child, developed a heart condition, and he couldn't survive his problem with his heart, and so he passed away in 1959, and he was just short a month or so of being 5 years old. That was a tough time, but people rallied around, and some of the doctors donated their time and different things to help us, and it was a time, tough times, and we didn't have a lot of money, so the stake president helped us quite a bit, and so we got through that tough time, and it was a beautiful place to have our kids go to school, and the church was strong, and I really cherish the memories of the Columbia Basin part of our life, and lots and lots of experiences out there. And I guess I should tell the story of clearing the sagebrush off this farm. It turns out to be a little over 300 acres of sagebrush land, and how to clear the sagebrush was a real problem. Some of the people had the same problem, were buying these big, expensive cutters, mowers, choppers, whatever, and I didn't have money to buy that kind of stuff. And I was inspired, I think, because I got the idea that if I could somehow get this sagebrush rolled down and have it dry out, that maybe I could burn it off. So I've got pictures in there of this roller that I made, about 10 feet wide, maybe a little more. I think it was 10 to 12 feet, and 4 feet in diameter. It's an old boiler that I was able to buy in Pasco or Hanford over there. And I filled it full of cement, and as I was filling it with cement, I'd put this pipe through the middle of it, end to end, as an axle, and then I put in a hitch anyway. Don't know how to make it quick, trying to describe the thing, but anyway, my dad had let me take a D2 cat out there to help me clear the sagebrush, and so I hooked onto that roller and rolled the sagebrush down, and it was so big and it's kind of brittle, and so I mashed it down and then let it dry out for about a week or 10 days, and then set the whole thing on fire. Had a lot of dry June grass, and it just cleared the sagebrush off of 300 acres.
It's a big fire.
It made such a big old fire that the people across the river, across the Columbia River, in this nuclear energy place called Hanford, they got a little nervous, so they started flying their airplanes over and circling around, seeing what was going on, and wondering if their place was in danger or anything. But I've felt all my life since then that was a real inspiration to be able to do that and make it really work. There was hardly anything left of the sagebrush, just a few straggler sticks, and the kids and our family would go out there and finish gathering up the stragglers that didn't get burned, and so all we had to do was start plowing the dirt, and it was beautiful, beautiful dirt. I raised some big crops of big sugar beets as big as a 5-gallon bucket. It was a wonderful blessing to have been able to get that farm like that. It really gave me a boost in life. We had sugar beets and beans like lima beans and red beans, and lots of alfalfa, and I didn't raise much corn because we had sprinklers, and you can't raise corn with sprinklers very good. You can now with these big circles, but in those days you couldn't. And the first year I raised peas, seed peas, and getting started on brand new ground like that, it was kind of risky because you didn't know for sure if you were going to get water for sure. But I can say that I never had a crop failure in all the years that we farmed there. Some years it was wondered if you were going to have a crop failure, because one of the tough things to deal with was the windy climate. It was a very windy country, and so anyway, we had that beautiful experience in Washington.
Did your kids help a lot with the farms?
They did a lot. They sure did. To this day, they have some real fond memories of going out early and late and moving sprinklers and helping to drive the tractors and things. And there's some beautiful stories of those two that they can tell about, you know. Alice and I, well, we'd moved to Utah. We'd sold our farm, this big old sagebrush farm that we'd spent so much time and had so much fun on. We decided to sell it. My back was wearing out, and so we decided to sell the farm and move to Utah. And so we moved to Howell, Utah, near Tremont, and bought a dry farm and had it for 4 years, and decided that that wasn't the thing we needed to do, and so we moved back to Washington again, and spent a little time there, a few years, and then we sold out again. There's stories to tell all the way along, you know, but and each move we made has turned out to be a really good move monetarily. And so in 1991, we had moved back from Washington back down to Utah, and we had enough money from the sale of our farm in Washington to buy ground in Alpine. Well, it turns out that we bought 30 acres south of Alpine. Half the 30 was in Highland and half in Alpine. And it turned out to be a really good blessing for us too, because we could sell it for quite a lot more than we bought it for and things like that. And so anyway, then we decided to sell that and sell the house we had bought in Alpine and move down to Payson. And so from Payson, Alice and I were called to go on a senior couple mission to Washington, D.C., South Mission. And this is a real miracle, because, and it almost makes me weep to tell this story, because I don't know how it could have happened, but soon after Alice and I came home from our Washington, D.C. mission, our secretary of the mission that we'd been in called us up. We'd been home a month or two, and said, the Deseret News, Church News has called and wanted somebody that has come home to tell their story of what their mission was like. And so we said, yeah, we'll try to do that. And so in a few days, the editor of the Church News called asked us to send our story in, and if they decided they wanted to print it, why they would print it in the Deseret News Church section. So between the two of us, mostly Alice was doing it because she's good at that kind of stuff, but I was helping her with some of it. And so we filled out got the story ready and sent it in, and lo and behold, in August 21st, 1993, Church News had this story about Alice and my mission. About all you need is couples caring under. I think you can just type those words in Google and it'll come up. And so here came this article out in the Church News, and as soon as it came out, we started getting telephone calls from my old mission companions, and my aunts and uncles and different people were calling and thinking that was pretty great that we had our article and story of our mission in the Church News. And so, but here's the miracle to my mind, of the whole thing is that Alice and I didn't have a house when we came home from our mission, and so we were waiting for a time when we could get our house built. We still owned land, but we didn't have a house. We'd sold our big white house on the hill in Payson, and we were living in this rented apartment and going to church in the 4th Ward there. And so we were sitting there getting ready for meeting to start, and in walks the stake president. He hands me this letter. It's kind of a fat letter, and I look on there, and he says, this letter came to me, and it was this letter to you inside a big envelope with my name and that, and wanted me to get this letter to you, because in this article in the Church News, all it said was that we were living in Spanish Fork, 4th Ward. But as soon as I saw the name on this letter to us, Glenn Keys, and I started to cry. And I've known this guy clear back 43 years earlier in Canada. My companion and I had to hitchhike from Cornwall over to Morrisburg, where some of these families lived. So we hitchhiked every Tuesday over. So we'd get over there in the evening while we'd have these meetings. And one of the meetings was these two girls that were sisters. And one of them had a boyfriend named Glenn Keys. We gave him the lessons and talked to him and tried to get him baptized and so on. And then it was about this time that the mission president had called me and told me to move over to Ottawa, and that they wanted to do an elders team and they wanted me to play basketball. So I left, and so I didn't have contact with these folks anymore. They left. I left them a picture of me, just a little Kodak picture of me and my little sentiment on the back. And then I moved away, and so I lost contact from then on, and I came home, and so here I sitting in the church coming home from this other mission, and these guys had read this article in the Church News, and they were getting ready to go on a mission of their own.
Oh, wow.
They'd gotten married and said that they had tried. It was a 9-page letter, and they'd kept my picture and that written on the back all those 43 years. And so, man, that was, they said that they had been out to Salt Lake after they got married and tried to find me in Sugar City. And I'd moved away from Sugar City, so all the contact was lost for 43 years. And so, man, what a neat deal that was. This Glenn Keys that I was telling you about that sent me the 9-page letter, they'd come out and tried to find me and all that. Anyway, he knew this other family that I'd been acquainted with. And, well, this older couple, older than I was anyway, would have meetings in their little house along the St. Lawrence River. My first Sunday there, they had a testimony meeting, and I got up and gave my testimony. I think there's only 12 people there in Cornwall. And after the meeting, this lady said, I'm Sister McDonald, and she says, I wanted to tell you. She says, how did you know that you said exactly what our little group here needed? And I thought, man, what did I say? And I don't remember to this day what I said, but it impressed me a lot. And then it turns out that their grandson had come along, and he became the bishop that had got to be a ward. My companion and I started the branch by renting a little old place, and it was just more or less a bar. We had to clean it up every Sunday. It was ugly, but we got it started, and then by this time that this 43 years had gone by, and so this Glenn Keys happened to know this grandson of this family of McDonald's. And so I got hooked up, and here's what I wrote to him. Just read that to me.
Okay. You don't know me, and I don't know you personally, but I knew your grandparents in 1950 when I was a young missionary. One of my first experiences in Cornwall was attending sacrament meeting in your grandparents' home on Sheik Island. I think your Aunt Grace Dunlop was there, and maybe even Jim. I was impressed and loved them all from that day on. I sent Glenn Keys a copy of my day-to-day journal of my days in Cornwall. If you'd be interested, I could send you a copy as well. I was young and maybe a little cocky then. Now I'm an old man of 83, but I remember well many of the good days I spent in Cornwall. I've always loved missionary work. My wife Alice and I served a mission from 91 to 92 and 93 in Washington, D.C. South Mission. My wife Alice passed away in 1997 as a result of a car accident. We were serving in the Provo Temple at the time. I love the church, and I can tell you do too. I hope you don't think I'm too forward to write you a letter like this, but I felt impressed too. I will close now. I will send you a picture with your relatives and me.
And so it was such a delight to get hooked back up with people like that you know, it never ends. Each one of these pictures has a story all its own. And here's a picture of one of the lady missionaries, Sister Orm, and the same time I was kind of getting hooked up with these others, Rick and I traced her down on the internet.
Oh, really?
She had an interview about like we're doing with her granddaughter, and she was from Shelley, Idaho. We found her son's phone number, and so I called that number. So I said, you haven't seen me or heard this voice for 43 years. And I says, I don't suppose you could guess who it is. And she couldn't. And I told her who I was. And she about fell off her chair after all those years. And so we've got hooked back up, and she sent me some beautiful emails, and I even taught her how to go tracting, which was a kind of unusual setup. But
Yeah.
every one of these things has just got stories that it kind of made my hair stand on end. We took Rick, Alice and I went down to pick Nola up, so we flew down to Guatemala City, and then we traveled up into the mountains. We rented a car and went up in the mountains of Guatemala and visited where that earthquake took place. And I don't know if you remember the story of that. They call it the elder that wouldn't die. Name's Randy Ellsworth. Here's a picture of him and his wife. And he was pinned under a big beam. The church fell down. And it pretty much crushed the life out of him. They thought he would never live. And as it turns out, Randy Ellsworth taught Nola some of the Indian dialects, and finally went back and finished his mission. And it's a miraculous story in itself. This little branch in Potsdam, Guatemala, the church fell down, and so we went and visited. And this is the new church after it was rebuilt, and that little short guy he's the branch president, and he lost his whole family except I think one son, and then the son got killed trying to help other people. A big wall fell on him and killed him, and so it was a really tough time for the Choates. But what's interesting is that when Alice and I were living out there in Salem, I needed some help with my eyes. I needed my cataract taken off of my one eye. And so I just looked up in the telephone book who the eye doctors were and everything, and went in there, and turns out to be Randy Ellsworth. So this Randy Ellsworth was pinned under that thing in Potsdam. He operated on my left eye.
Oh my goodness.
Can you imagine that, getting hooked up like that? Just a miraculous thing. You know, it just mind-boggling sometimes how things work out. I just have had a wonderful life, and so I just am really thankful for all the good things that have happened to me. Things have been really hard, you know, not having my sweetheart Alice to help me for quite a few years now, and I could have gotten better, I guess. Some people do through things like that, but I just feel really blessed to have an anchor and know that I'll be with her again. And so that's what I have to look forward to. And she helps me even now, you know, by kind of feel her influence and how good of a lady she wants to help me. Look at those little people.